Obviously, those who have been mainstays of the scene are the ones that I'm much more knowledgeable about, right? So Doubt, Yo, Leary, Hera, Viper, MBL. Whew. No one's really like asked me that pointedly recently.
I'd like to start this by talking about how you first started your career as a host. And, this is a
Oh,
story you've told many times before in interviews, so I'll just try to summarize it for my viewers. Back in
okay.
2013, you had recently graduated from drama school, right? But you were still working as a bartender on the side. And
Yes.
at the bar, one of the customers you often talked with happened to be working for Riot, and she convinced you to apply for a job with them. They did end up hiring you, but you wanted to be an actor all your life, and that's kind of the part I want to concentrate in. Now, myself, I'm a classical pianist, in case you didn't see it. And after reading you describe your childhood as an actor in other interviews, I was struck by how similar our experiences seem to have been.
Really?
Coming home late from rehearsals, having to do homework after practicing for hours and stuff like that. And as a pianist specifically, if you somehow dream of having a career as a performing musician, a lot of us actually dread the day we graduate from college because there's just no clear path at all for how to go from holding a diploma to actually getting enough engagements to make a living from performing alone. And so, seeing as you were still working as a bartender after graduating, I wonder if this is also a common problem with actors, and if this is the kind of situation you yourself find yourself in back when you applied for a job at Riot.
Yeah, I mean, I think acting is such a tricky beast because I think so much of it is about right place, right time. And I think some people are aware of that, and some people unfortunately are not. And maybe a little disillusioned that that hard work and grit can get you to where you want to be in the entertainment business. And again, I think you can attest that at times it's not about that. You could be the best actor in the world, and if you just aren't in the right room with the right casting director, then you'll never make it. And it's not a reflection of your ability or anything like that. So I mean, without a doubt, like, the classroom is a safe space, right? Ooh, I get to go to college, and I mean, the reality is I'm paying to act. I'm paying a tuition in order for the privilege to act, as opposed to the other way around, which is what you hope it to be.
Right. In my case, I just had a goal. As long as I'm
Right.
in college, I have a goal in front of me. I want to
True.
have I want to finish my degree. But once I graduate, what now?
What do you do? Exactly. I mean, and again, I think that's where so many people, they ultimately get lost, because in their brains they say, I have the ability, and the ability to act is what's going to make me successful. And in reality, that is an important piece. If you don't have the ability to act, then I don't think you're going to, move on to win an Oscar. But I actually think that's the last piece. That's the least important in some ways, is your
Really?
actual ability to act. Well, because it's the last thing that people see in some ways, right? Like,
True.
you have to get into the room. If you're not in the room, it does not matter how good you are. You've got to find a way to get your product, which is you. You are the product. You have to find a way to get your product in front of people. It's the same. It's maybe a good way to think about it is think about it like an entrepreneur. Okay, I've developed this product, and I know it's useful. I know that it, takes 15 minutes out of a normal, dinner preparation, whatever this thing I invented is. So people should want it. Okay, well, you have to get it in front of people. You've got to get it in front of the big retailers and the manufacturers, and then the product matters once you get there. But until you get there, it doesn't matter. And so I think you put it very well, though, where it's like when you're in school, you always have an objective. It's about that grade, or it's about that four scene class, so you're just focused on that. And then you kind of get out into the big blue world, and you're like, what the fuck do I do now?
Right.
Like,
Right.
where do
Right.
I go? Also, I didn't ask you if cussing was okay on your channel, and I
That's
just
that's that's cool. I might have to bleep it, but don't worry.
okay,
Don't worry.
I'll
Just let
try. I'll
loose. Just
thank
let loose,
you.
my friend.
Thank
It's
you.
all good.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a scary place to be, right? But also, I will just say
Mhm.
that is what I enjoy about acting as well. I never wanted to have that, certain cushy office job where I knew what I was doing every day, and it was just about finding a rhythm and a schedule. I always enjoyed working on a project for a finite amount of time, doing and putting 100% of myself into it, and then saying goodbye to it and moving on to something else. I don't really like being stuck in one place, um, which is actually why a lot of people were always so curious throughout my 10 years at Riot. Is he going to stick around? Like, what's going on? Because I think I made that pretty evident to people early on in my career. I was like, hey, everything's fair game. I could be, Martin Scorsese offers me a role in a film
I'm
tomorrow,
out.
guys. I mean, come on, like, you're not gonna blame me either.
Right, James. But I wonder, how was it like for you when you accepted the job or when you applied for the job? So were you like in this limbo? I'm getting a few engagements, but not enough. So maybe I'll just take the shot and apply for Riot. Or did you actually really want to do this? I'm kind of wondering, what was your mental space
the
looking like?
the logic behind going through the whole kind of application process and interview process was really just not denying myself opportunities. um I was, again, only a year out of college. I was very much in a place where luckily I had financial stability and support from my family and things like that. So I recognized I was, in a position of privilege to be able to make maybe choices that other people would not be able to make
Right.
in their lives. um, but ultimately, it was just about not turning down opportunities. And largely because I was starting to realize and come to terms with what we were just talking about. I had an ego on me as an actor. Don't get me wrong. I thought I was I mean, I still think I'm the shit, right? You have to. If you want to be a performer, you kind of
Absolutely.
have to have an
Absolutely.
ego, right? But I definitely had one coming out of college, man. I thought 1 year and I'm on the big screen, like people are, okay, well, 1 year went by and I was not on the big screen. And so when this opportunity presented itself to me, I'm not even a person who really thinks of is like super spiritual or thinks of like, the universe giving signs. But I was like, if ever there was a sign to
That was
just
it.
explore an opportunity, it's this,
Hmm.
because I absolutely did not pursue it. It was, it kind of fell onto my doorstep. And in doing so, I said, okay, let's take a moment to breathe and think about this. This job is a weird confluence of all of the things that you love in life,
Hmm.
right? I grew up as an actor from age 7 onward. Okay, I'm not acting per se, but I'm in front of a camera, entertaining people, talking about a game I love, and putting smiles on people's,
Right.
faces.
Right.
I was myself a gamer, spent my entire life gaming longer than I've been a gamer longer than I've been an actor by
We're
only
going
a
to be
few
talking about that. Yeah.
by only a few years, right? And so again, I was like, well, it's in the gaming sphere. And not only that, I had been playing League of Legends for a year. It'd be one thing if, say, well, Overwatch wasn't around at the time, but
Right.
since that's
But
just another
if.
big,
Hmm.
like if
Hmm.
Overwatch was around at the time and they had offered me a job, I don't know if I would have pursued
You'd
it
be
because I
skeptical.
just
Hmm.
simply wasn't playing the game and I didn't have this deep love for it. But League of Legends, I was already watching the World Championship on my own time as a fan. So now the idea of being the person who opens and closes the show was pretty cool. So there's that. And then finally, just the idea of sport and competition. I was a runner, started running, early on in elementary school, through high school, through college, and competed at, nationals and made All American there. So again,
Cool.
just kind of looking at a career opportunity that took three defining pillars of my life, smashed them together and said, here you go. I was like, oh my God, I would be absolutely
You'd never
crazy
forgive yourself if you didn't try, right?
to not go have the conversation. And so
Hmm.
that's what I'll say is I really just told myself, go have the conversation. I almost didn't take the job, if I'm being honest. I got offered an initial job at Riot, which was for a role called collegiate specialist. And it was so not the hosting stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I spent a good hour talking to the hiring manager kind of through the whole situation. And actually, he's the person who convinced me that that was not the role I should take and that I should push for something else because he saw it in me. He's like, you want to do something else. And so it was kind of because of him that I even got further pushed over into the esports space. But Anyway, there's a very long-winded,
That's so
answer to
fun.
how I got to a place of,
That's why we're here for long-winded
being willing.
answers, my friend. Yeah. So acting was one of your passions, but it certainly wasn't the only one. You just said you also loved gaming, and if I'm not mistaken, Age of Empires 2 was one of the first
Yes,
PC games you owned. So
absolutely.
so I'd love to hear the story of how you first came into contact with it.
So I here's the thing, I don't even remember, like, if I asked my parents for Age of Empires or if they just got it for me. I mean, again, that's me aging myself, I guess, in our demographic, like,
My
of the
friend,
audience.
I can, you're younger than me. Let's go with that. You're
Sure.
younger than
Well,
me,
but you
so
okay, but so maybe you can resonate with me in this feeling. It's what's so cool, and I say that I think it's very cool, but it is very strange. Right now in Age of Empires 2, with its, revival over the last 7, 8 years on Twitch, whatever it's been, right, where it's really boomed. It's been interesting to see a new wave of players who are all young, right? And they don't have the disc gaming experience that we had, and I'm like, okay, there's two different like generations of Age of Empires player now. And anyway.
with a
Um
lot of folks, I think the demo came in a cereal. I hear from a lot of
okay,
people,
maybe that's what it was, because I
yeah,
ate a
yeah.
lot of cereal as a kid.
Yeah, so, how young were you back then when you first
I
played the
had to
game?
have been, I mean, do you remember off the top, what was it, 1999 that it was released?
1999, Age of Empires 2, yeah.
1999, right?
That
So
would
I
that would have
was
been the Age of Kings, I believe, and then, the
eh,
Conquest expansion a little bit later.
yeah, so Age of Kings, I believe, to my recollection, I never played Age 1, at least not
Mhm,
as a kid. So I would have been 8. I was born in 1991, so
mhm,
I would have been 8, and that about tracks. I mean, I think before that, the only other games, like real games that I played aside from like Putt Putt's Adventures for learning games, was Command and Conquer, Red Alert, Command and Conquer.
Wow,
Very
yeah.
very similar style game, right? So
Right, right.
I got turned on to RTSs. And obviously that was kind of the wave of games at the time, and found my way into Age of Empires 2. But I mean, I just played through the campaigns, had absolutely no clue what I was doing. I'm sure,
Nobody
like
did.
most people, I thought that the best way to win was to wall 400, 400 times, build 15 castles, go full longbows, no siege, and just kill people with like 120 longbows at range. That was pretty much my Age of Empires gaming experience.
Mhm,
And then obviously I evolved through the rest of games, and I think, like a lot of people, kind of, age went to the back of my brain and dissipated, as a game forever kind of held the spot of like, favorite game or near and
mhm,
dear to my heart, kind of until World of Warcraft would be like the first game that really just took me in a different direction.
mhm, mhm,
um but age, I played completely solo until high school. And here's one little funny like tangent. My sister's boyfriend in high school was a big gamer, and we played
mhm,
World of Warcraft together.
mhm.
But then at some point it came up over one summer that, like, that Age of Empires, we had both played it or remember that game or something like that, right? And so we put together an Age of Empires 2 LAN party, when
LAN
I was like
parties were
15 years
so
old.
fun.
Oh, it was so much fun. And so, but that was the first time I actually started playing really truly with other people, and also people who were better gamers than me.
Mhm,
And I started to actually look at and understand that this game was way more complex than I had remembered it, right? I mean,
mhm,
obviously it's an RTS, it's very complex, but as a kid, I didn't think about it as such. And that was my first kind of experience looking at it as a competitive game.
mhm.
Again, it kind of dissipated from my gaming
Did you come back
repertoire.
to it when the HD version came out? That's when a lot of people came back to it.
So
Would you say
no,
that's
I
so what?
actually only came back to it because of Twitch. I came back though when we were still on Voobly. I mean, HD existed, but I'm one of those people where I want to play where the best people are playing, right?
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
I was literally just trolling around on Twitch one day. Now we're already fast forwarded to the point where I'm the
Yeah, we're
host
gonna
of the
get there
LCS,
anyway, that's fine.
all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so whatever this was, like maybe 2015, 2016, somewhere
Right.
around there, a while back, I was,
Mhm,
trolling around Twitch, saw Age of Empires 2 as a category. What the heck? People play this game still? Click in. And I don't remember, in all honesty, who was the first stream I clicked on, because at this point, Age of Empires is my most watched game on Twitch, actually,
That's
more than
amazing,
League.
man.
If you
That's
go and
amazing.
look at my stats, I watch more Age of Empires than any other game. So I truly don't remember if it was T90, if it was Viper.
2015, we probably didn't have T90 just yet, or he
Yeah,
wasn't big
maybe.
whatsoever. Probably
Yeah,
Viper,
exactly.
CH,
So
maybe Dreams.
something
Those
like
were,
that,
yeah,
right?
those were the guys. Yeah. So you said you were a very competitive guy, and you mostly enjoyed gaming
So
for the
competitive.
multiplayer aspect of it. Did you have the chance to play back to play online back in the days as well? Do you remember the Zone, for example?
Like way back in the day, I definitely did through like I played for a bit on God, what was the platform called?
The Zone, probably, that was like the
There was the
official Microsoft
Zone.
platform.
Yeah, probably Microsoft Zone. That sounds familiar. There was another one though
Zone.com.
with the word like fire in it or something, if I recall correctly. There was one other
Fire.
platform that you could like
There
set
were
up.
so many.
I know. So not much. What I'll say is
All right.
what I'll say is not much. Actually, funnily enough, the Age of Empires game that I played multiplayer more of was actually what was it called Empire Earth, the one where you could go into
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Um, that one because it actually had more like multiplayer functionality. I played a little bit of that multiplayer, but honestly, not much. Again, once World of Warcraft came out when I was in 8th grade, I basically became a World of Warcraft gamer and nothing else for, the next 7 years.
Awesome. Listen, James. Going back to your early days of hosting, you were hired by Riot in 2014, but I think the first time you actually hosted the LCS was in 2015. I
Technically, I hosted summer of 2014, but it was the last 4 weeks of the split.
Right, the first
So
whole season was
truly
2015, right?
2015. I also consider 2015 to be like my real start, but just for the historians out there, week 7,
All right.
2014, they'll get you.
Thanks for the correction. And I remember watching the LCS many times back then, and not necessarily because I liked League of Legends, but
Okay,
mostly because I was fascinated by the spectacle, and by the production value of the whole show. And
totally.
since you were always the one greeting me to the show, for the longest time, you were sort of the face of esports for me. And one thing in particular I remember being totally struck by was just how unabashedly passionate about esports everybody seemed to be. People
Hmm.
would get excited, people would scream and shout, and they might sound totally normal to some folks. But when I was growing up, James, gaming had a very bad reputation, and in fact, it
Mm,
was very often discouraged. So, for me to see grown up men and grown up women being so openly passionate about something I was also passionate about, which is so cool. Now,
right.
we both come from the same generation, roughly, so I wonder if you also had this experience growing up, that gaming was
Uh,
just something you're supposed to grow out of.
oh, total, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And I say this having wildly supportive parents
Hmm.
who are very happy that I'm happy, love that I do what I do, but were even skeptical about the job itself. As I was explaining to them and going through the hiring process. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, no doubt, you go back to my childhood, and I'm sure it was a lot like yours. Gaming was it was something I was allowed to do, but it was always kind of well, it was seen very much the same way that like TV time, would be seen,
Right.
right? As like
Right.
this is what you do once you've completed all your responsibilities, your room is clean, you've done your homework, you've already been to track practice
Hmm.
and and rehearsal and all this kind of stuff. And generally there were also limits, limits I didn't follow. Sorry, mom. But I had it was like supposed to be X amount of time on the computer per day and stuff like that. Again, I think they did still see it. It wasn't like they thought video games were the devil. It wasn't.
Hmm.
I wasn't in one of those families. They absolutely saw the value from an entertainment perspective, but that is where it stopped.
Right.
For my parents was okay. This is entertainment. This is a reward. Uh, but it is, it's not a lifestyle. I, at the time, already thought it was a lifestyle.
Hmm.
Lucky for us, it became a lifestyle and something that we could shape our lives around. But I do think all the time about like, oh my God, if I was born a decade sooner, none of this would have been, like I would have missed all of this. And likewise, if I was born a decade later, I think a lot about like, well, sure, I'd be coming up more in the prime time of gaming, but the position that I hold now would not have been available to me. So I really was kind of born in a sweet spot.
Hmm. Hmm.
To end up with the relationship that I have with gaming, which I do think is a unique one. We are in that generation of having experienced kind of life before the internet,
Right.
and life after the internet,
Hmm.
and and not everybody who plays games nowadays knows what that feels like.
Even for me, it's unthinkable just to think back how it was back then. It's
It
amazing.
is so wild to think
Yeah,
back about
right?
how, like,
No
I'm like,
cell phones.
oh my god, just going through my day, man. Again, the fact that I'd be playing a game and the phone would ring at home and the internet would shut off, and you're just like,
So true.
ah,
So true. It
oh
couldn't be on the
man,
internet, and right, your phone line would be blocked. Right, amazing.
yeah,
James, after Riot hired you, you said they actually gave you the freedom to choose what role you wanted to fill in the broadcast, right? And initially, you wanted to be a caster, if I remember correctly, but you ended up choosing to be a host because you thought the skill set of a host was the most similar to the skill set you would acquire from your training as an actor.
yeah.
So,
I'll
in what? Right, go ahead.
Let me just clarify. I'll clarify a little bit on that. It wasn't like I was given carte blanche, like, hey, what do you want to do, and you'll get that role.
Right.
Um, in discussing, like, hey, I do want to focus on being a caster, I was passed off to the lead of the esports department at the
Hmm.
time to have some conversations, and so it was a back and forth between him where we discussed really what their needs were, as a broadcast, and he identified, because the host role did not exist at that point. So in
Interesting.
my mind, I was only thinking color caster or play by play.
Yeah,
Like those were the only two options.
you wanted
And
to
so
do
I
what you
was
see. Right, right.
so I was
Mhm.
saying I want to be a color caster, and he said, "Well, he basically said, did you watch the season 3 World Championship? It's the first time we've ever had a dedicated host. What did you
Mhm.
think?" I said, "Oh, it was good." He goes, "Do you think you could do that?"
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Sure, why the heck not?" And so that's kind of that's the genesis of it. And then we
Right,
had a couple more conversations about what really it would look like before committing to it.
right. So, in what way do you think your training as an actor helped you in your role as a host?
Whew. Okay. Well, in numerous ways, but I think the absolute most obvious is vocal training. Our bodies and our voices are our instruments as communicators and casters and hosts and all of these things. And so, without a doubt, spending 20 plus years of my life completely focused on my instrument and fine tuning it, having control over my voice, having clarity when I speak, all of those things became hugely relevant, to me being able to sit on camera, speak confidently, read a teleprompter, not so confidently at first, but eventually, you know. I think vocal training was quite clearly a huge base,
Mhm.
for me to build upon. Beyond that, though, I would say then it becomes about comfortability in insecurity. Acting is always about exposing insecurities in us as humans. I mean, we're doing something very unnatural. Everyone who goes and sees a movie or goes and sees a play, they know you're acting. Like,
Right.
you're not actually fooling them. Like they consciously know you're acting. In fact, the audience is making a decision to kind of let that
Let
go
go. Right.
to
Hmm.
participate in the film, and that's where they can really get pulled in. And I'm not saying that there's no difference between a good and a bad actor. There's
Right. Right.
definitely a difference, but the reality is everybody knows you're acting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but it is about becoming comfortable in uncomfortable and abnormal kind of circumstance. And same applies to live broadcasting. Nothing about live broadcasting is supernatural, right? Like, you're trying to present it like it's natural, but let's be real. The two casters just finished casting. They do their wrap up and they say, now we're sending it over to the analyst desk, and this giant crane with a camera on it, starting back here, pointing at the wall with a teleprompter on it, comes swooping down into the zone, and I'm trying to read it, as it's flying down, like, "Hello and welcome back to the State Farm Analyst Desk," and boom, 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 and we're here and we land, and how about that game, guys? And it's like, that is so unnatural. Nothing
Right.
about that is natural,
Right.
but
Right.
when you become okay with it and you just kind of give into it, it becomes so much easier and it breathes so much more. And I just think that is something that acting allowed me to do. It allowed me to be comfortable in those uncomfortable situations. Breath control, making, honestly, giving me the permission to make wild choices, and kind of generate excitement. Again, sometimes you have to do work on it. It's work. Sometimes you have to do work. It may not have been the most exciting game of the week, but you kind of,
Mm-hmm.
your job is still to sell it to some degree, right? So I'm acting sometimes, if
Right.
I'm being
Right.
honest.
Right. Right.
There are
Right.
so many things that go into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do really think I was set up well, having had an acting as a base.
Mm-hmm. Despite you being one of the most beloved hosts in the industry, it's interesting to me you said you never stopped thinking about going back to acting. And in fact, you think about it every day.
Yeah.
So if you do decide to go back to it at some point, could the fact you've worked in esports so many years now turn out to be a bit of a liability to you? I mean,
No,
if
it already
you
has.
right. I mean, I'm wondering if you audition for a role and the director looks at your CV and sees 10 years working in esports. I wonder if that would put you at a disadvantage towards an actor who
Um,
presumably kept auditioning for roles during all these
Yeah,
years.
it absolutely does put me at a
Hmm.
disadvantage, and that
Right.
was something I was conscious of in moving into the space, and that's part of why I think a lot of people don't understand why it was a hard decision for me 10 years ago to
Right.
become a host. Uh, it was the toughest decision I ever made in my life.
Hmm.
Very strangely, for a lot of people that go, "That's my dream job." It would have taken me half a second to decide to do it, and he's
Hmm.
saying he almost didn't do it. That's wild. But it's a lot for what you're talking about right now. Every second you spend, outside of the acting space is a second where you become. I'm going to use this term. It might not be right, but it's almost a second where you become more irrelevant to the industry, right?
It's so true for music as well. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Hmm.
And so and it's for multiple reasons. I mean, one, yeah, just from a personality perspective, right? Like they again, entertainment, they want to use the hottest person for, in that moment for, the role. But beyond that, you also your skills degrade, right? I've spent 10 years not auditioning. I still think I'm a very good actor, but I've spent 10 years not
Right.
acting.
Right.
And just like a soccer, you take a professional soccer player and you say, okay, don't play soccer for 10 years and then try and go back. Don't play piano for 10 years.
Yeah. Forget it.
Now try and go back.
Yeah.
Like you're
You're out.
just going to be worse,
You're out.
it's
Yeah.
going to be very difficult. So without a doubt, it's a liability. I say that there are some areas where it can also help me. So I don't want to paint it all doom and gloom.
Right.
Like, so my skills have degraded, and yes, I'll be honest with you. Um, I'll even reframe going back to acting. Acting is something I'm always trying to do. My agents are constantly looking for opportunities for
Hmm.
me, so it's
Hmm.
not like I've spent 10 years not looking for anything.
Right. Right.
But to your point, the feedback that we get most often when I get submitted for a project from a casting director is, well, he hasn't done anything for 10 years.
Right.
And they don't care, guys. They don't care that I've hosted arenas, 80,000 people full,
Right. It's
and
just
for
something completely
hundreds,
different.
if
Right.
not millions, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide. They do not care. They go, that's different. That has nothing to do. And they're right. I mean, they're right. I'm not saying they're wrong, but they don't even count my 10 years of this job as being even remotely relevant,
Right.
to what they do. So no, it's incredibly difficult. Now, all that said, I will say there are also a few positives
Hmm.
that come from it. They haven't necessarily netted me anything yet, but let's not ignore the fact that I have a brand and a following
Right.
that I
Right.
would maybe not have had. I mean, who knows?
Without esports. Right.
But without esports, I would not have been elevated to a level as a public, or public brand or
Hmm. Hmm.
personality that I would have otherwise. So there are ways in which that can end up helping you. I mean,
Right. Right.
Ninja's a good example. I mean, different. I'm not saying he and I are the same, but
Yeah.
Ninja's a good example. Ninja's been in film and television, not because he's a good actor. Love you, Ninja, but not because he's a good actor,
Yeah.
because he's
Because of his
big.
popularity. Right.
Right. So there is potential and there is a pathway to acting or to being a part of things that is more about just getting big enough to warrant or demand that opportunity. The goal for me would then be to take that opportunity and prove that I'm also good enough,
Right.
and then ideally it becomes about, oh, okay, well, we should just work with him because he's a damn good actor.
Right.
So I just want to throw that out there as like, I don't always, it's not, black and white
Of course,
100%,
of course. It's very
in those
interesting to hear that
situations.
perspective, though. Yeah. So, James, I was just talking with Tristan the other day, and he told me it must have been around 2017 that you started showing up in his channel from time to time.
Okay,
That's what he said. And every time you
he's
would
probably
type,
right.
it's probably right. Every time you would type something, the chat's reaction would always be the same. Is that the real Dash?
Yes.
Damn. And at the time, he didn't really know who you were. But after a while, he did find out more about you. And in fact, he told me one of the biggest confidence boosts he ever got in his career was seeing someone with your notoriety say so many good things about him.
Holy, I didn't know that. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
he just told me that. So how did you find this channel? Was it just totally random? Did somebody kind of give you a
It
hint?
was totally random. Like I
Yeah,
said, I spend most of my time on Twitch in the Age of Empires tab. Again, I don't watch League of Legends
that's amazing, man.
outside of my job. So I probably still have more hours watched of League of Legends, but that's because for 10 years, that's all I
That's
did for
work
work.
for you, right?
So when I came home, the last thing I wanted to do was watch League of Legends. And
Mm-hmm.
so, again, in finding that Age of Empires 2 still existed, I started kind of diving into that. Initially, was watching more of the high level players. In terms of finding T90, quite literally, it was that he was the first caster I came across. So I'm certain there were others.
Right.
Again, I'm not trying to, yeah, again, like I've
Well,
watched plenty of Mem, I watched plenty of Nili, I watched plenty of Ornlu, I watched plenty of Dave, as well nowadays. But at the time, I don't know if it was just I came into the category on a day where he was casting an actual event, or if it was just random pro
mm-hmm.
1v1s.
You just got
But
hooked, though.
the fact that he was casting is what caught my eye. I said,
Right.
"Oh, now I can finally watch this game with the spectator perspective as opposed to just a single person's perspective." And so I got much more interested in watching it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And since that he was the person delivering content in that way, I just immediately dove deep into his channel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so through all of the iterations, from the original Hidden Cups onward,
You
so
watched them all?
oh, I've watched them all. I
That's
think
amazing.
if I recall correctly, was it only Hidden Cup 4? I've cast in a bunch of stuff too.
Yeah,
I
you've
think the
cast
first time
Hidden Cup 2, I think, if I'm not
Hidden
mistaken.
Cup
Hidden Cup
2, I
2.
think, yeah,
Right.
exactly. I was like, not the first one, but I think I cast in the second one for one series. If you go really far back, there's actually, this isn't casting actually, but funnily enough, I played in a Doubt versus Viper show match, a
What?
4v4 show match way back in the day. I was on Viper's team. We lost. It was a best of 5. We lost in the 5th game.
How did you get in? Was it just totally
It
random?
was it was like a different, it was like 4 different elos. So it was like pro player, a 2K,
I
a
remember that.
1600, and then like a 1300 or a 1200, and I was the 1300, 1200, and I literally just like, I think I messaged in the Twitch chat like, I'll play,
So it was
and
totally random?
yeah, like super random. I think again, some people knew who I was,
All
so
right, all right. Mhm.
it helps to have that kind of name identity, and then people go, "Oh, we should bring him in." But yeah,
Mhm.
I got to play alongside Viper um, and Doubt like a long time ago. Got completely thrashed. Um, but yeah, man, I have been lurking and around in the scene longer than most. Actually, I think that's what's also been interesting about it is that really I got in just before, I would say just before it started to explode
Explode.
on
Yeah, yeah,
Twitch,
yeah.
to
Mhm.
the levels that we're seeing in the last 3 years.
Yeah, right. I would
For Age of
say
Empires.
things started to go really increase and explode around shortly before DE version. The DE version came out. It was
Yeah.
when the Yololo Kingdoms patch started to become more
Mm-hmm.
popular and people started playing the new civs. Microsoft began, sponsoring tournaments here and there. So how much do you actually play Age of
Uh,
Empires?
it comes and goes in waves, and a lot of that is more dictated around my schedule and
Right.
where I'm at in my life at the moment. Right now I'm playing a lot.
Well, that's
I
awesome.
I play mostly team games, if I'm being
Team
honest.
games. Okay.
Largely because I, I I am a very competitive person, And so if I play solo, like if I play 1v1s,
You get mad?
I well, I mean I get mad at how not good I am.
All right.
Like I get mad at myself, largely because again, it's a game that I think I understand pretty well.
Mhm.
I think that's also kind of the reality of being a host or a caster or broadcaster, is that you generally you come to understand games better than you can play them.
Mhm.
And that can be a
Interesting.
very frustrating position to be in as someone who is then also competitive, right?
Right.
It'd be
Right.
one thing
Right.
if I
Right.
didn't care how good I was,
So the
but
hands don't do what your
the
mind
hands
is
don't do
telling
what
you
the
to do.
brain
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I just haven't put in the time
Right.
or really the effort to truly get better. I've learned my basic build orders, but even nowadays, you've seen, or really the build orders that I learned back in 2017 and 2018, they're irrelevant
Not
now.
viable anymore. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like I mean, you used to do what was it, 26 vil fast castle. People are fast castling off of like 23 vils nowadays, and I'm like, that is
Right. You boom
absolute,
maps. Yeah.
absolute insanity, though, that people are pulling that kind of stuff off. And so I'm like, again, I kind of got to a place where I was like, I'm okay, more so just enjoying this game.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
find that team games allow me to do that with a little feeling of less pressure. But I play all the time, in all honesty. I mean, I played that Nomad
Yeah.
tournament
I
with
saw.
with
Hmm.
Dave Bullet and in T90 just the other month. Um, but it definitely comes in waves. Like right now, I'm going more back into League and Valorant because I just need to remind myself how these games work
Hmm.
for my job, since I will be working on both the LCS and Valorant a little bit
Yeah.
still.
You just announced yesterday, right? You're going to be in
Exactly.
Valorant.
So I'll be in.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. But yeah, I'll be in Brazil actually right before this Berlin event for
Amazing.
NEC4. So, but yeah, so part of that is like some of my gaming habits literally just follow
Right. What you
what's my
need
next
right now.
job. Like,
Absolutely.
oh, I need to
Absolutely.
learn about Valorant, so I got to go play that.
Hmm.
But no, age becomes my game. It's usually like hanging out in Discord with friends and we're all playing together something else. And then kind of like as maybe people start trickling out for the night or we transition to our own things, I usually
Hmm.
hop over to Age by myself and I just quietly play a game or
Sneakily. That's
two.
awesome.
Yeah, completely by
That's awesome.
myself. And
Just
everyone's like, "Where's James? Where's James?" Oh, he's probably playing Age of Empires. Yep, you're right.
I feel like this is the gaming equivalent of asking a lady how old she is, but what's your elo, if I may ask?
I love that. I'm 1300 1v1s.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
So
good. Wow.
I don't know. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, if
I
you're
don't know
thinking
what
about
I don't know what the distribution is anymore, right? Like typically I look at that where I'm like, does that make me top 50%, top
average is a
15%?
1K. 1,000 elo is
1K is
average.
average. Okay.
So 1K3, it's
All right.
well above average.
Good. I'll
So that's
take that.
awesome.
I've always said if I was actually gonna push, I would like to try and get over 1800. Like that would feel really good for
It's
me.
incredibly hard, I'd say.
Oh,
But
I know it'd be incredibly hard. I'm just saying, but that kind of feels like somewhere where I'd feel happy and accomplished, but also knowing that I am light years still behind, the top class, the really elite players. Um, because yeah, I think in a lot of other games where I have invested time, League, Valorant, things like that, obviously we don't use a strict dealer system, but like platinum diamond is usually the level
right.
I can get
Right, right,
to.
right. Hmm.
And so I kind of usually hold myself to that standard when I look at competitive
When
games,
you
is
look
you
at
should be able
gaming.
you should
Hmm.
be able to get to that like top 5%,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that anything past that is maybe unreasonable. So that would be my goal if I ever went really hard. Who knows, maybe I'll make a push right before I come out to Berlin, that way I can like 1v1 Dave or something like that.
So I have to ask you this: have you watched Red Bull Wolo Legacy?
The Empire
The
Wars
l-
tournaments.
yeah, right. The very last one. Have you watched it?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I
I'm a
watch all VODs. Unfortunately, I can't watch that stuff live. Like I was at Worlds.
mhm,
But
mhm.
again, like I said, I come back to the hotel and I put on
Age of
the
Empires.
Wolo VODs. Yeah, I watch all of it. Usually on like 1.5x, but on VODs, and yeah, I watch it
Hmm.
all.
So I'm a big fan of Riley Knight, the host of that tournament. So
I love
right. I wonder what you make of him as a host because a colleague of yours, obviously.
Yeah,
Oh,
I absolutely adore him. I actually had a
right.
call with him just for the first time ever. Um, God, maybe right before Christmas, before the new year, I
Hmm.
finally got to talk to him just because we were talking about some career stuff. But I had had finally had the opportunity to tell him that I thought he was an absolutely phenomenal host. Actually, if you go back, I think I did this on the call with him. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm Googling it. James Ash Riley Knight. A couple of years ago, out of nowhere, I tweeted something about him.
And he answered?
No, he didn't. That's the
Okay.
thing. I don't even. It's not even coming up off of Google search. But I think it was 2 years ago, and it
Mhm.
was leading up to the esports awards actually. And
Mhm.
I think I had been nominated, and I like quote
You've
tweeted it. So
recently won it for
I
the
did.
folks
I
not
won it
aware.
this year, but this. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
This was a year I did not win, but was nominated. But I kind of like retweeted the tweet and said like, grateful to be a part of this
Right. Mhm.
group or whatever. And then I think I said, but you got to look out for people like this. And basically,
That's
and
amazing.
so
Wow.
Riley Knight and Caleb Simmons, just known as Wave Punk
Mhm.
on Twitch, is another big host. Those two, they're like, in my opinion, two of the best hosts that are still kind of underappreciated or
Mhm.
underserved in the community. But I mean, he's an absolute rock star. I know that I've gotten tweets once or twice before about people being like, "Oh, come in and host," and I take very firmly the stance that I do not want to host for Age of Empires.
Okay.
If an event demands a host, I think Riley is the
They should
person
get
for it.
Riley. That's
I
amazing to hear. Okay. So much
I
respect for a
truly do
colleague.
think
That's
so.
amazing.
He look, I mean, come on. All you got to do is go back and watch that Wololo event, and there's no one better for that role considering the game that we are talking about
Right, right, right.
and his knowledge of history and things like
Just
that.
fits so well, right?
This is all before we even get to him just being mechanically a great
Right.
host. But I'm
Right.
talking about, the person who is right for the job. And I'm sorry, I am not right for that. Do I think I would do if Riley didn't exist, do I think I would do it well? Yes. But do I think I'm the right choice for the job when Riley Knight lives in the same universe as me? Absolutely not for Age of Empires. So from my perspective, I'm a caster in Age of
Mhm.
Empires,
Right.
and that's kind of the route that I would like to go because I
Mhm.
feel like there's more, there's availability there,
Yep.
there's still some need, I think,
Mhm.
for
That's a
different.
perfect segue to my next question.
Let's
So
get it.
you've been recently announced as one of the forecasters for NAC4, and for those of you not familiar with the Age of Empires scene, NAC stands for Nili's Apartment Cup, which is considered one of the grand slams of the tournament scene in Age of
Yeah.
Empires. And yes, the first 3 iterations of this tournament were indeed played in Nili's apartment.
I'm almost a little mad that this one isn't because I won't have gotten to experience the apartment.
Right, not going to be the case anymore this time around, though. And I'll put a link to the announcement trailer down below for those interested. So I wonder, how do you envision your role as a caster during the event? Are you going to be doing pure play-by-play? Will you be doing some analysis too?
Well, so I need to, in all honesty, I need to talk to Nili a bit more about that
Okay.
because, again, at least from my perspective and where I come from, it's not my choice.
Hmm.
It's what does Nili need me to do? I assume that he has some specific caster pairings in mind that will be, kind of played out most frequently. I'm sure then, as has always been the case with past NACs, they will be swapping in pro players,
Right.
into casts and things like that. So I might have the opportunity to cast with multiple different people. But I think, yeah, off the top of my head, I would imagine you see T90 and Dave a lot together, and
Hmm.
myself and Nili a lot
Right.
together. That to me feels like a natural pairing.
And in that pairing, you'd be doing mostly play-by-play, I
I would be
assume.
mostly play by play. I
Right.
think of all four of the casters that you see at NAC4, I'm the one who will be most kind of like what's the word I'm looking for, like specifically
Hmm.
a play by play. Dave and T90's approach is much more hybridized because they're both very knowledgeable. So I feel like the way that they approach casting as a pair is a little bit more give and take on both sides. For
So
myself
interesting.
and Nili, I think we'll have a little bit more of a rigid play by play color relationship. Not to say I don't know a thing or two about the game, but definitely
Absolutely.
would lean
Absolutely.
more on his expertise at times than
Hmm.
mine. And
So
then yeah, I'll
interesting.
be the hype guy.
So interesting you would say that because I think right now in our community, I would say we don't really have what I would consider a pure play-by-play caster, and I think that's the case because most of our casters are used to cast alone in their own
Yes.
Twitch channels, so they sort of develop this style where they combine both caster roles into one. So
Yeah,
would you say
absolutely.
that
I actually think Memb is your closest.
probably right, right.
Closest, but even he,
Sometimes
to
Dave,
your
sometimes
point,
Dave.
yeah, to your point, he largely casts alone on his channel, and so he has built up an incredible knowledge base and can deliver that as well. But I find that when I see pairings happen, he's the most willing and most likely
To
to
take that
kind of
role.
to go more into play by play and hype, and let the other person be the color or the
I agree
the expert.
100%.
Yeah.
Would you say that because Age of Empires is a somewhat slower paced game compared to other esports, it doesn't necessarily need a play by play caster, or do you think a good PvP caster will always enhance the viewing experience?
Uh, I mean, I think if we're trying not to split too many hairs, I think as a generalized statement, that's correct. It is a slower paced game. Even the highest intensity moments in Age of Empires still relatively slow moving. It's a nasty onager shot that kills 20 expos or something like that. Is a hype moment, but even the animation
That
of
only
that is
happens, and that
pretty
only
slow,
happens at the
and it
right,
happens once and at the end.
right,
you
right.
know so there is a lot of build up, and there's but again, to your point, I think that because there can sometimes be only a few of those really hype moments, it actually, my hope is that it'll showcase what a really, really, really strong play by play can bring to the
Mhm.
cast when they get it right. Like, and that I think is the difficulty of a slower paced game, is identifying the turning point or the climax of the
Right.
game. Sometimes the game ends
And you
and
don't even know
casters
why.
realize it kind of after the fact, right? Because
Mhm.
literally an engagement will happen. Sure, they'll talk about how it was an important engagement, and then kind of like when the dust settles, they go, "Oh shit, he's 5 villagers behind. The game is over." Like in reality, the game is over, kind of a thing. Um, and so I think having a good play by play, or play by plays, the best ones, will be able to kind of identify and build to those moments a little bit better and help the general curve or arc of the story of the game.
Mhm.
Um, but no, absolutely. I mean, you're right in that it is a less important role. Well, maybe not a less important role. It's still an important role.
Less needed, maybe.
I just think maybe the emphasis on the talk fast hype hypeness maybe is
Not as
lessened,
needed. Yeah.
because
Mhm.
yeah, you're just, again, Age of Empires versus League of Legends, a big 5v5 team fight where individual players are going down versus, okay, two armies of 60 where some trade is made and one castle goes down. Like, it, it is a slower paced game. The way you win in Age of Empires generally takes more time. And so yeah, but that I think is also the difficulty of being a play-by-play in something like this. In League, it's very obvious when all 10
There's a
champions
team
start,
fight. Yep.
yeah,
Right.
all 10
Right.
champions start fighting. Get loud, start shouting, man, and something's going on. Oh my god, oh, whatever, this team goes.
You know what?
In Age of Empires, it's like they're dancing and shooting volleys
So
of
true.
arrows at each other, and they're split microing and dodging, and no one's hitting anything, and like, it's high intensity, yes, but you're like, I don't know when to like peak in
Mhm.
my voice,
Right.
because
Right.
this could go on for 2 minutes. Like, I've watched guys micro battle for 2 minutes, and so like, how do you
So true, man.
how do you how do you tell that story? How do you music? Like, I love that you're a pianist, because a lot of the way I think about the flow of casting is actually through like musicality, right? You cannot be the same
Yeah,
note
you
the
need
whole
to
way through.
underscore the important parts. Right.
Yeah, it's not interesting to play the same note all the way through,
All
but
the
it's
time. Yeah.
also not interesting to just keep going up,
Be
keep
up
going
all the
up.
time. Yeah.
You've got
Mhm.
to come back down and give yourself
So
a
true,
moment to
man.
breathe.
And something I'll never forget. There was this time I was watching a broadcast of League of Legends. This was many years ago, and the color commentator was speaking. And at some point, there was a team fight which was about to start, and the
Hmm.
color commentator literally stopped speaking mid sentence because it was clear. So this is
Yeah.
something the play-by-play caster is supposed to do. It was such a mind-blowing moment for me. He just literally
Just
stopped
get
speaking
out
in
of
the
the
middle.
way. Yeah.
Right.
Just like, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. James, a lot of our pro players have been playing this game forever. A perfect example would obviously be someone like Doubt, who's been at the top of the game
Hmm.
for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And because these players have been playing this game for such a long time, they all have a very personal story within the game. And that's something that we as fans are very, very familiar with and something we love to talk about. So I wonder, how familiar are you with these kinds of stories?
More familiar with some than others, if
Hmm.
I'm, all cards on the table. Obviously, those who have been mainstays of the scene are the ones that I'm much more knowledgeable about, right? So, Doubt, Yo, Leary, Hera, Viper, MBL. Um, I'm obviously forgetting a few.
That's a lot of them.
Well,
That's a lot
yeah,
of them.
sure, but
Impressive.
I mean, even Vivi, who we don't see too much anymore, right? But like, there's plenty of names out there that I'm quite aware of. Admittedly, it's more of the new wave of top level players that I'm needing to learn more about, and thank God for T90's Titan League for that, because it's
I've been
actually
watching that too. Amazing.
oh yeah, man. I watched everything. I'm not kidding when I tell you I watch everything. So yeah, I mean, just last night I went to bed watching a 2-day old VOD of Dave and T90 for Titans League. So I was watching the MBL versus Yo matchup, as well as, who was it earlier? It was Kingston versus Miguel. Did Kingston play Miguel earlier that day? I think it was. I mean, obviously they're all in groups of 6, so they play plenty of people.
There's
But like,
a bunch of
but,
people.
but Kingston is a great example of a player who is much newer,
Right.
and
Right.
I
Right.
don't know that much about his origin. I just
Mhm.
know that he's here right now and he's good.
Right.
But I wouldn't be able to tell you what his way of getting to the top level was. So that's somebody that I'm going to need to do more research around,
Mhm.
if he makes it to NAC4. That is, I guess to some degree that's the benefit of NAC4, is that it is a small tournament, and so we're very likely to only get the very top echelon of players. Oh, I didn't say Nikov or Kapoch earlier, who are people I'm well aware of and have been watching. I mean, again, like, I'm not kidding when I tell you that I'm as much a part of this scene as anybody else. But yeah, I mean, also, like, I've met a lot of these people, funnily enough. When I was in Berlin last, I actually got to meet Doubt, Jordan, Viper, and Nili all for dinner. We all went out to dinner. Just because
What,
we all
what
happened to, so they were in Berlin boot camping for the Red Bull tournament at the
which one
GL
would
house.
that be?
This last year's
The Red Bull Legacy, or was it the one
or no, it
before?
was the year before. It was the year before.
Okay,
Sorry,
Red Bull
because
Five.
this year Worlds. So yeah, because yes, exactly. Because Worlds was in Berlin, or I was in Berlin
Hmm.
rather,
Hmm.
for Worlds. And so yeah, while I happened to be there, they all came to the GL house. Oh, and I met Slam too, because Slam went to that Red Bull.
He was there at that boot
He
camp.
was
True.
there for that one, not this year's.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so I met Slam there as well. But we went out and we got sushi. Doubt is
He's
so
huge,
tall.
right? Yeah.
Oh my god.
I was surprised too.
I was beside myself. Like, I did not know how to interact with him. It's like one of those things where I
It's
was
kind of
just like,
massive.
my brain went blank. I totally was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to be around you.
I had the
Um,
exact same feeling when I saw him for the first time. He's
he's so tall. But I spent most of that dinner actually at the end of the table talking to Jordan and
Mhm.
then Nili a bit, as well. I mean, obviously I was talking to all of them, but yeah, I've gotten
Mhm.
to meet all of those guys once already. Hera is somebody who's I've spent a lot of time in his stream. He actually coached me for a few sessions
Wow.
way back in the day. Again, we're talking like 4 or 5 years ago. Um, he coached me a few times just for fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been around. I'm aware of most of the top level guys and their stories, and then I am becoming more and more aware of some of the younger players as they make names for themselves. I mean, like, watching Sato play has been just such a treat. Most
Mhm.
recently, seeing a number of the guys who are jumping up, running, put on some impressive showings early on in the Titans League, in just getting promoted. Kingston as well. Draken even taking some games. I mean,
Look at
uh,
you.
yeah. I love it, man. I love it.
That's awesome. Um, so if you're so familiar with the scene, do you have like a specific preparation in mind for the tournament, or you're just going to be doing what you do anyway every day?
Largely it's going to be continuing to do what I do, right? Which is just consume the content. Because being keyed into the scene and the conversations that the community is having is is generally the most important thing, right? I want to make sure that I'm generally touching on the storylines that people care about. So that
Right.
means being aware of what their conversations are, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
community's talking about this player. Let's make sure we know what this player is all about so we can further their story. Beyond that, I need to link up with Nili. Some other stuff has kind of dominated my attention in the last few
Mhm.
weeks, so it's time for me to link back up with Nili as we move into NAC qualifications.
Qualifiers. Yep.
Because my hope is to get some casts in with him for the qualifiers, so we
Awesome.
can get some reps in ourselves. Maybe also get a cast in with Dave. Who knows? And then
Would that
same
be
thing for
on stream?
that would be ideally on stream.
Awesome.
Because again, I need to. Yeah, I just need I need as many reps as I can. Probably gonna try and cast some T90 Titans League as well, where I can. But I think in the coming month. So for the month of February, I think people will start to see um, more age content on Twitch from me. Maybe even playing
Maybe.
some as well. We'll see if I don't know. Like I said, I play age a lot, but I'm always scared to stream it because it's so stressful.
Chat.
Like,
Chat
well,
can be hard.
I'm not even worried about chat because actually chat's generally very supportive, at least
Yeah.
at my level, you know. But my issue is that I can't. Age of all games that I play takes the most focus from me, right? When I want to, like, I can kind of turn my brain off and play League of Legends and
Mhm.
respond to chat, you know, and
Mhm.
interact with people.
Mhm.
As soon as an age game starts, I won't read a single message from chat until the game is over. So I just feel bad because I'm not very interactive. I'm like, I am
Mhm.
so laser focused and even still screwing so much stuff up. So
I think a lot of
we'll
people
we'll
can
see.
relate to that.
Yeah, we'll see if I play any age on stream, but I'll definitely be trying to cast some of the qualifiers and some T90s Titan League to get some reps in, because I think that's a lot of what it is when it comes to myself and Nili. We've cast together once, maybe twice
Mhm.
total,
Okay.
in the years that we've known each other. So a lot of our initial work is going to be about just figuring out the way each other thinks.
Right.
What are
Mhm.
our tendencies, what are our habits. The more I can learn what his natural stopping points are for
So you know when
speaking,
to take over. Mhm.
and we're
Yep.
not jumping on top of
Right.
each
Right.
other,
Right.
all
Right.
that kind of stuff, right? Like the reality of being a good caster pairing is working out a lot of those mechanics,
Right.
and then figuring out how our energies play off of each other, right?
Mhm.
I'm curious to see how a Nili and I iterate as a duo, because he's got this incredible dry humor that
Right. Are we prepared for that?
that's sometimes I'm worried that sometimes I'm going to take him serious, like I'm going to take him seriously when he's joking, and then I'm going to think he's joking when he's serious. Like, I can't wait for it. It's one of the reasons why I love listening to him. I love listening to Dave and Nili as a caster duo,
Mhm.
because they'll do the same thing to each other. And then sometimes I'm literally there and I'm like, are
Dink
they
just stops,
fighting?
right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm literally like, are they mad at each other? Like there are times when I think that, and then like it's never the case. But literally in the middle of a cast, I'll be like, did he just piss him off? Are they mad at each other? What's going on here? And like Dave will just like stop.
Yeah. I
And then
love when they just
Nilly
stops.
goes like one or two more times, like with the same. Yeah, I love it. But obviously, and we have to build our own synergy, our own kind of relationship with each other. So that's what a lot of the initial and kind of early work will be spent on, is making sure that we work well together. I think as individuals, all of us are prepared enough to talk about the game, but it's about how do we tell those stories together.
All right, James. A lot of our professional scene is centered around casters. For example, three of our so called Grand Slams are actually organized by casters themselves.
Hmm.
NAC is organized by Nili, Hidden Cup by T90, and King of the Desert by Mem. And that means that even if someone doesn't enjoy the commentary from one of those guys, they usually still respect the work they do in just supporting and developing the competitive scene. Now, as I told you before, I personally am a huge fan of your work. I've been following your career for years, and I couldn't be more hyped to see you cast an Age of Empires tournament. But when the casters for NEC 4 were announced, a few folks were quick to ask, why is this League of Legends guy taking Mem's spot? And again, I believe a lot of the sentiment comes from the fact people respect the work Mem has done for the community,
Hmm.
and they feel like he deserves a spot casting at the LAN. To be clear, of course, you're not taking anyone's spot. I mean, you didn't just invite yourself. But I think it isn't crazy to imagine that if you had declined the invitation, Nili might have reached out to Mem because
Sure.
they've actually been a casting duo for several tournaments now. So I wonder, how do you view this whole situation?
Yeah. So let me try and tackle this from a couple angles. First and foremost, I love that people are shouting from the rooftops about wanting to see Memcast and supporting him. That's the way it should be, right? I imagine a similar circumstance happening in the League of Legends scene, and I would hope that people within that scene are shouting about this person who has dedicated so much of their life, their time, their energy, and their passion to the game. And I love seeing kind of a community rally around those figures, and that's exactly what
Mhm.
should happen. I think by the same token, right, we want to see our scenes grow, and so that's where I would say to most people, it's up to me to prove that I'm deserving of this opportunity. And as you said earlier, I'm not. My goal is not to take anyone's spot. I think esports scenes are big enough for many people. My hope is that we grow Age of Empires to a point where there is the space,
Mhm.
for more than 4, more than 6, more than
Right.
8 casters, right? Um, and so I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful to Nili for the opportunity. I'm grateful to the community for, hopefully giving me the space of this event to prove myself. But really, I guess, yeah, my perspective on this is it's only positive. It can only be positive to bring in more people, larger audiences, and things like that. Um, I am in no way attempting to replace Mem. I could never. That guy is an absolute workhorse.
Mhm.
The number of hours that he puts in to Age of Empires, just boom, flat. That as a statement is astronomical. He has incredible passion, which I hope to be able to match. It will be embodied in a different way. We are different people. You're not
Mhm.
gonna see me, try and be Mem. Mem would never try and be me. But yeah, no, I guess my perspective on all of this is that one, I think we can try and look at it as an opportunity to expand the scene. And that's what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping that there are going to be people who forgot that Age of Empires existed, but
Right.
who know who I am and want to support me, who are now going to come into the Age of Empires scene and help the Age of Empires scene move to yet another level. Like we've already surpassed to such a degree what I thought Age of Empires could ever get to in a
Me
revival.
neither. Me
Like,
neither.
how much further can we go, man? I'm like, strap in, seatbelts on, I'm ready to go. And I want to be a part of that. And I think that I would encourage everyone to be open minded because that is ultimately how scenes grow, right? Is that we open our arms to other people, new perspectives. Yes, that does mean some iteration, some change, stuff like that. But I think it'll ultimately only benefit, the scene in the future. I don't know if that's such an effective answer to your question. It's a tough one to answer because I do recognize that I am an outsider to a lot of people. I don't
Mhm.
consider myself an outsider in this scene, as
Right.
we've kind of
Because
gone through throughout
right.
this whole
Right.
interview. But I know that for a lot of people, I am one, and so I'm going to try and be as respectful, to that as I can. I ask for the same in return,
Right.
from people to please be respectful of my time in the scene and give me a little bit of time to grow. Nobody was great out the gate. I wasn't great at hosting the league when I first started. T90 will tell you he wasn't good at casting when he first started, right? For Age of Empires. So without a doubt, there's going to be some bumps along the road, but I hope that at the end you see my passion for the game. You see my desire to help the scene grow, and my love of the players. And I think if I can get those three things across throughout this event, on top of then just having the repetitions to get better as a caster, that we're going to have a good time. And then hell, maybe the next event we are in a position as an esport to have 6 casters.
Right.
To bring Mem back in and to bring Riley back in. Or again, we get to a place where, and this is a crazy one, guys. Think about this. The game gets so big that you can have all these casters and they don't work every event. Just like League of Legends. I don't host every league in the world. And if you want your sport to grow, there's a harsh reality that at a certain point, not everyone can be a part of everything. And so that would be maybe my final kind of nugget is like maybe take this as a sign of how well the scene is,
True.
like
True.
how healthy the scene is, that we're at a place where more people still want to come in to get in and to be a part of it, and nobody's left up a creek without a paddle. There are so many events now throughout a year that are run either by people within the community or the big, ticket events that Red Bull comes into or whatever. But we're getting to a place where now there are options for more people to step into the space. And so I don't know. That would be um, my positive take on all of this. Is to me, this is a sign that that Age of Empires is moving into yet another tier of of esport, because we're getting to a place where more people want the job than there are roles. But ultimately, that's a good thing, I think.
As far as I'm concerned, that's an awesome answer. And I will say your passion for Age of Empires is palpable in this interview. So I'm
Oh, thank
very,
you.
very, very happy for that. All right, James. I imagine one of the reasons you're actually available to cast NEC4 is because your professional situation has recently dramatically changed. Again, this is something your fans are obviously well aware of, but for the folks in my audience who don't yet follow you, roughly 1 month ago, you've announced Riot had informed you they had decided to restructure the broadcasting format for the LCS, and they wouldn't be needing a consistent desk host anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that means that for the first time in almost 10 years, you will not be a regular member of the LCS's broadcasting talent. I imagine at first this must have been incredibly hard to stomach. So I guess the first thing I want to know about this is how are you now?
Whew. No one's really like asked me that pointedly recently. Obviously, throughout the whole process, people ask me, so I
Yeah,
haven't had
that's why I'm
time to
asking
take
you
time.
because I was
Yeah,
missing that
well,
question.
one, I appreciate the question. Thank you. I'm good. There are definitely, better days and worse days. I think anytime you do something for a decade and dedicate almost all of yourself to that thing for that decade, like I really didn't do anything else for a
Hmm.
decade.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to be hard to step away from it or to change your relationship to it, which has been what the last 6 to 8 months has been for me since I found out, because I found out a long time ago.
Right, right.
So again, what was weird about it is I took like 6 months to kind of come to terms with it, and I thought I was in a really good spot, and then I made
But
the
then you
announcement.
came back. Yeah.
Well, I made the announcement, and I saw how the community reacted, and it just brought a whole nother flood of like emotions up to the surface. That I was like, okay, cool. I haven't dealt with any of this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Time to time to like almost like therapy. I was like, oh man, I gotta like actually sit with my feelings and get through it. So with another month since that has happened, I feel in a much better spot. I think part of
Hmm.
that is because I know a bit better about what my year looks like.
Okay.
Again, I went from having like a full calendar every year for a decade to having nothing on my calendar, which is very scary
That
as a
was scary. Yeah,
freelancer.
yeah, yeah.
All kinds of thoughts jump into your like. I bought a house almost 2 years ago. I've been considering selling it. They're like
Hmm.
all these kinds of things jump into your
Yeah.
brain about like I don't know if I can afford to keep, whatever. So plenty of bad, but I think in the last couple weeks things have kind of really started to move in the other direction because of things like this. Like I'm filling up my calendar and I'm starting to see what my life looks like.
Right.
Without the LCS as my mainstay, and so having locked down the Valorant contract, I'm still going to be working on League a little bit and having
Hmm.
that contract solidified. Having Nili reach out for this event and getting those flights booked and stuff.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
now I can kind of look
Right.
two
Right.
to 3 months in the future, and it's not just a wasteland. So I feel a lot better now. I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm excited about being able to make some of my own content, stream more often on my own, and dive into some other games again. How many years I have been talking to Nili or T90 about doing an event, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
While again, I've done occasional casts here and there, I've always talked to them about, and Nili has invited me year over year to be a part of events, and I've had to turn it
Really.
down
Hmm.
just from a scheduling perspective. That finally this year I could say I'm doing it, and I committed. So no, I'm in a much better place now. I think we're going up. We've started the upward climb again, which means that it's going to be a year of a lot of work, but I think all good things.
It's a reality that a lot of people are, I think, are not aware of, right? As a freelancer, if something like this happens, it's just so hard to deal with it at first, right? Because you
Yeah.
depend so much on this. Yeah.
Right, it would
I
be one thing if I could hop onto unemployment, like in losing a full-time job and know that I'm still getting money for a few months. I That's not an option for a freelancer. I go from making money to making no money
right,
and having
right.
no jobs, and trying to fill my calendar. So again, luckily I have an incredible team around me, manager and agent who are super supportive and they put in a lot of work.
Oh, by the
Um,
way, Brianna, your agent, I've been talking to, such a nice person, so
Brianna,
helpful all the time.
she's amazing. Such yeah, literally I'm 31 years old, but she's like the adult. You know how like sometimes you're like, I just need an adult, and I'm
Right,
like, that's
that's
Brianna. Like
her.
when, yeah, I'm usually, she like, I know I've screwed up when I get a text message from her because like she'll send me like an email,
You
and if
missed
I don't
something.
if I don't respond it, but then if I get a text message from Brianna, I'm like, oh, I have something I need to do right now. Like
Mhm.
but I love her for it because she keeps me honest, she keeps me on track, and she fights for me, and then I'm sure you had the experience with her. She's on top of it, man.
Right.
Like if you need answers from her, she's great. So I'm blessed to have her on my team, and having that kind of support around me has been awesome. Having the support from the community, I mean, the way that the League of Legends community kind of banded around me when all this was happening has been phenomenal, and I have felt that support up until today. So feeling great.
Awesome. James, about to let you go. Um, every time I hear a company talk about restructuring, in my mind, that almost always means cutting costs, whether
Mm.
they openly admit it or not. So when I see a company like Riot not fighting to keep one of the best talents in the industry, such as yourself, I wonder what that means for the future of esports. And, I keep hearing people say that right now esports as an industry is just this big bubble. On one
Hmm.
hand, you have tournaments with huge prize pools, you have players earning very good salaries, and on the other hand, you have teams that keep struggling to turn up a profit. So just the other day, I was reading an article about the FaZe Clan, one of the
Oh yeah.
largest esports organizations, which might be on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yep.
Do you fear that the bubble might be about to pop?
Definitely. If it hasn't already to a degree. Because I think you're seeing kind of that constriction of investment in teams. And that's where I'm seeing it mostly. It's more about seeing budgets for teams than budgets for games or for esports broadcasts. Because I think developers are not necessarily the people that are hurting for money, right? Um, and that's the benefit of being a game developer who also runs the esport and the league and has the broadcasting rights
Hmm.
and all of that, right? So they have complete control, which is not what you see in traditional esports. Um where i where i really see the bubble is when I look at teams, when I look at roster moves. So like in League of Legends, because you can kind of very clearly see, or you have an idea of what players are worth.
Hmm.
So when you see rosters get put together and you go, okay, that's a cheaper roster than the roster they had last
Right,
year,
right,
or
right, right.
something like that, you start to see constriction in investment as well as all of just the blatant layoffs, right? Almost
Hmm.
every single team org has had layoffs in the off season. So to me, that does indicate that people are constricting because we realize that we've pushed and overvalued. But also to everybody who's not like I'm not a super economics person, but that also is just generally the way the world works is,
Hmm.
right? Inflation and overvaluation, and then we market
Back to
correct, and
reality.
and you just do that. Like it's literally that over and over again.
Hmm.
And so that it's also not, and I want to just point out that it's not unnatural in life cycles of sports that you have periods of great investment and then constriction and then
Hmm.
great investment and then constriction.
Right.
So one, maybe this will help with some concerns. It's natural. That is supposed to happen in business and in life in general. But um, I think what can be scary about for me, what is scarier about esports is actually just the longevity of any individual sport, right? What happens when technology becomes obsolete and therefore games become obsolete? What happens to all of the investment into League of Legends when League of Legends just is no longer either a playable game, a popular game, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Those are the things that scare me more. What happens when VR becomes good enough that
Hmm.
people stop using computers? Like, I have a keyboard and a mouse. Okay, well,
For how
one day,
long?
right? One day, we're not going to use keyboards and mice to control computers. Like, I just you know, one day we used to ride horses, now we drive cars, right? Like things are going to change. And when that happens, I don't know how the infrastructure of esports and the current games persist. The benefit of traditional sports is that they use human biomechanics, so they're always relevant. We
So
as
true.
humans, I mean, unless we live for another million years and evolve into, underwater fit, like then, okay, then all sports become irrelevant too. But until that happens, the humans are not changing as fast as technology is changing. And so for my bigger concern for esports is actually the rate at which technology is developing, more so than money. Like there's always money. Again, I think I've strayed away from your question a little bit when it comes to like me being let go or the idea of like investment. I truly don't think that letting me go was purely a money thing. I'm
hmm
sure it was on somebody's mind. Like there's no way around that.
hmm
I cost money. So obviously
Right.
that, but I don't think that I was the drop in the bucket that they couldn't sustain. I don't think that like my salary or my day rate was what would have made or broken the league. And so I don't think the decision was made as a result of that. I think the decision truly was made as a result of data that they had seen around the success of viewership of the league and the health of it, and just deciding that they needed to do something different, very
hmm
wildly different. Um, and so yeah, changing the relationship of my role, or just removing my role from the broadcast, they felt like was a good answer. um yeah, I mean, we're very clearly in a bubble. I'm not generally worried like for what that means overall for esports. Like I think esports are going to continue to exist. Yeah, we're going to constrict for a while, then we might see another expansion
hmm
or something like that, but I wouldn't be worried for esports as a whole. I would be more worried for individual games as technology develops and as new games release. Again, we all know what that experience is like for something to go from like the hottest game in the moment to be completely replaced the next day by a different game that is made in the same genre. So, yeah, my concern would be more like what happens when a new MOBA releases that makes League of
hmm
Legends obsolete, and that whole esport might collapse. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but that would be more my concern than
Right.
less money.
Right. James, this has been such an insightful interview. I had a great time, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm incredibly hyped to see you at NAC4. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to be there, but if yes,
Oh, I hope so.
I demand to have a beer with you. And
It shall be had.
thank you so much for your time, James. Thank you so much. Man.
Likewise, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.